Two women worked the same job in the same building for the same 22 years. One of them retired with $860,000 sitting quietly in her accounts. The other retired with $9,000 and a stack of unopened statements she was afraid to look at. Same paycheck, almost to the dollar, for over 2 decades. So what happened? Her name was Carla. She ran the front desk at a dental office, wore the same three cardigans on rotation, and packed leftovers for lunch every single day for 22 years straight. Nobody at that office thought about Carla's money because there was nothing to think about. She drove a scratched-up Honda with 190,000 miles on it and never once complained. When she finally retired, the office manager asked her, almost as a joke, what she was going to do with all her free time. Carla laughed and said she was going to enjoy her money. The office manager assumed she meant a small pension. She did not mean a small pension. She meant close to $900,000, built one unremarkable paycheck at a time, and she had never told a single coworker. The other woman, we'll call her Renee, was the fun one. Everybody loved Renee. She hosted the holiday parties, always had the newest phone, took 2 vacations a year and posted every single one of them. She made the same salary as Carla, sometimes a little more with overtime. And when Renee retired, she had almost nothing left. Not because she was reckless or foolish, because nobody ever sat her down and explained the one thing that actually separates people who end up with money from people who end up broke after a lifetime of honest work. Today, we're going to lay that thing out plainly because it's not complicated, it's just never explained, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's start with a number most people get completely wrong. If you ask someone what the average American family is worth, and you look up the answer, you'll find a household net worth sitting just over $1 million. That sounds like proof that everyone's doing fine. It is not proof of anything close to that. That number is an average, and averages are one of the easiest ways to lie with math without technically lying at all. Picture 10 neighbors on a quiet street, all living fairly ordinary lives. Then one of them turns out to be sitting on $50 million from a business that took off years ago. Suddenly, the average net worth on that street rockets into the millions, even though 9 of the 10 neighbors haven't changed at all. That's exactly what's happening at the national level. A relatively small number of extremely wealthy households drag the average number sky high, while the actual typical family sits far below it. When you look at the median instead, meaning the family standing exactly in the middle, richer than half the country and poorer than the other half, that number drops to somewhere around $190,000. And if you strip out the value of the house itself, since you can't spend the walls you live in, the real liquid cushion for a typical family falls to somewhere in the ballpark of $60,000 to $70,000. That's the real middle of the country, thin, fragile, and one bad year away from trouble. So if the middle is that thin, how does anyone end up like Carla? This is where it gets genuinely interesting, because the answer breaks almost every assumption people carry around about wealthy people. There have been large surveys of self-made millionaires across the country, thousands of them, and the results consistently blow up the stereotype. The overwhelming majority never inherited a meaningful amount of money. Most of them never earned a huge salary at any point in their career. A large share never crossed 6 figures in a single year of work in their entire lives. Their jobs are almost boringly normal. Teachers, accountants, office managers, engineers, small business owners, not hedge fund traders, not startup founders who sold for millions. Regular people with regular W-2 jobs who did one specific thing differently, consistently, for a very long time. That one thing is understanding the difference between looking rich and being rich, and this distinction is honestly the whole ballgame. There's a simple way to think about it. Some people are what you might call income rich. Their paycheck is large, their lifestyle looks impressive, and their bank balance barely moves because everything that comes in goes right back out. That was Renee. Every raise she got, every bit of overtime, quietly turned into a nicer car payment, a bigger apartment, a better vacation. It wasn't foolish exactly, it just felt reasonable in the moment, one decision at a time, for 22 years. Then there are people who are balance sheet rich. Their lifestyle might look completely unremarkable, but a chunk of every single paycheck has been quietly leaving their checking account before they ever had the chance to spend it. That was Carla. Same raises as Renee, roughly the same total income over the years, but every time her pay went up even slightly, she nudged one automatic transfer a little higher and then genuinely forgot it existed. She wasn't disciplined in some dramatic white-knuckle way. She just set something up once and let it run in the background of her life for over 2 decades. This is the part where most financial advice gets a little too smug, so let's slow down and be fair about something important. A lot of people are not failing because they lack willpower. They're failing because the margins are brutally thin to begin with. Right now, the personal savings rate in this country hovers around just a few cents on every dollar earned. A large share of households could not cover a surprise $1,000 expense without going into debt. For a huge number of working families, the just skip the coffee advice is almost insulting because there was never really extra coffee money to skip in the first place. Rent, groceries, insurance, and gas eat the paycheck before anything else gets a turn. That's not laziness, that's arithmetic. And it's worth saying out loud instead of pretending everyone has the exact same amount of room to work with. But here's the part that matters even for people who do have some room, because even people with money left over at the end of the month routinely sabotage themselves without realizing it. Long-running studies comparing what regular investors actually earn versus what the stock market hands out for free consistently find a painful gap. The average investor earns noticeably less than the market itself, sometimes several percentage points less in a single year. Not because the market is complicated, but because human beings panic. When prices fall, people sell to make the fear stop. When prices are soaring, people jump in late out of fear of missing out. Buy high, sell low, over and over, driven by emotion instead of a plan. Carla never did this. Carla, by her own account, barely looked at her statements at all. She set up automatic contributions decades ago and then, more or less, ignored the whole thing on purpose. That brings us to the actual engine underneath all of this, the thing that made Carla's boring approach so powerful: compounding. Over the last century, a simple broad investment in the overall stock market has returned somewhere around 7% a year after accounting for inflation. Nobody needed to pick a winning company or time anything perfectly to get that return. They just needed to own a small slice of the whole market and leave it alone for a very long time. Here's what that looks like in real numbers. Starting at age 30, investing a modest amount every single month at that kind of return can realistically build towards 7 figures by retirement. Wait until 40 to start the exact same plan, and the monthly amount needed roughly doubles. Wait until 50 and it can nearly quadruple. The destination stays the same. What changes is how much you're forced to pay because you handed away years that compounding needed to do its quiet work. And here's the detail that explains why panic is so expensive. A huge portion of the stock market's long-term gains happen on a small handful of days, scattered across decades. Miss just the 10 or 20 best days over a 20-year stretch because you got scared and pulled your money out, and your final results can be cut by more than half. Those explosive best days almost always land right next to the scariest, worst days, which means the people who sell during a crash usually miss the recovery by a matter of hours or days, not months. Carla never had to make that decision because she never checked closely enough to be tempted. Now, it would be dishonest to stop here and pretend this is purely a story about personal discipline, because part of this picture really is structural. A significant share of full-time workers in this country don't have access to any workplace retirement plan at all, and that access breaks sharply along income lines, with lower earners far less likely to have it than higher earners. The most powerful, most automatic wealth-building tool available tends to be handed most generously to the people who already need it least. On top of that, the basic cost of living has been quietly outrunning paychecks for decades. Housing now costs a much larger multiple of typical income than it did a generation ago. Healthcare and education costs have climbed dramatically faster than wages. The surplus that used to be left over for saving and investing has been steadily eaten by the rising cost of simply existing. If your parents managed to buy a home young on one modest income and you can't seem to get there no matter how hard you work, you are not imagining the difference. You're standing in a different economy with different physics. So where does that leave you specifically right now? Somewhere more hopeful than it might sound. Because underneath the unfairness and the tilted playing field, the actual method that works has never been complicated or secret. Put money automatically into a low-cost fund that owns a broad slice of the market. Do it every month without needing to feel brave or clever about it. And then do the single hardest thing there is, which is nothing. Don't sell when it drops. Don't chase headlines. Don't try to outsmart it. If there isn't extra money for that right now, that's real. And it's not a personal failure. But the moment even a small amount of room opens up, a raise, a paid-off car, a little extra from a side gig, the entire game comes down to where you point it. Point it at a nicer version of Renee's lifestyle, and it quietly disappears the way it always has. Point it at the boring machine instead, and 30 years from now, you might be the person nobody at the office ever suspected was quietly, thoroughly, completely fine. The math was never the secret. Starting early and refusing to panic was.